Ambassador Krellnan's 4 eyes scanned the human security detail with a mixture of disdain and mild amusement. Captain Morrison called out. "We're almost there." Krellnan huffed a breath, a sound that, to his species, conveyed supreme impatience. "Indeed. The sooner we conclude this tiresome affair, the better for all involved." He watched the security humans, noting their stiff postures and the way their eyes, so unlike his own multifaceted vision, seemed to track every movement. Vex Mari, still nervously clutching her data pad, edged closer. "Sir, the briefing did emphasize that while humans may appear physically unremarkable, their planet's high gravity and brutal evolutionary history have imbued them with unexpected resilience." Krellnan scoffed, a metallic click from his vocalizer. "Resilience? My dear Vex Mari, our own species, the Vthar, thrive in environments that would liquefy these humans instantly. We have evolved past crude physical strength. We possess intellectual superiority, diplomatic finesse, and the ability to project a calming bioluminescent field that can pacify even the most aggressive of lesser species." He gestured grandly with one of his 6 delicate digits, his bioluminescence pulsing a confident blue. The humans, of course, showed no reaction beyond their unchanging, almost unnerving, expressions. Captain Morrison, now just a few meters ahead, paused again. Her gaze, direct and unwavering, met Krellnan's. "Ambassador, before we enter the conference room, I must reiterate a critical aspect of human interaction protocols. We value personal space. Unsolicited physical contact can be misinterpreted. It is best to always seek verbal consent before any form of touching." Krellnan's laugh was louder this time, bouncing off the metal corridors. "Verbal consent for touching? Preposterous. We are here as equals, Captain. A simple gesture of camaraderie should hardly require a formal request." He puffed out his chest equivalent, projecting an aura of benevolent superiority. "Perhaps your species is simply oversensitive. A common trait among those new to galactic society." He ignored Vex Mari's frantic hand signals and the subtle tightening of the human security team's stances. This was an opportunity, he decided, to subtly assert Vthar dominance. To show these primitives that while they might be tolerated, they certainly weren't respected equals in the grand tapestry of the cosmos. He would demonstrate his species' advanced understanding of social nuance, by bypassing their supposed protocols. After all, what could a small, squishy human do? As Captain Morrison turned to open the large, reinforced door to the conference chamber, Krellnan saw his chance. He reached out a hand, intending a light, dismissive pat on her shoulder, a gesture of condescending reassurance. His multi-jointed digits, usually so precise and gentle, made contact. The moment his hand touched her, it was as if he had plunged his entire arm into a vortex of raw, untamed energy. It wasn't just the sheer density of her musculature beneath her uniform, which felt like touching a living rock formation. It was the unexpected firmness, the lack of give, the immediate, almost imperceptible tensing that ran through her. But more than that, it was the overwhelming, sickening sensation of her skin's surface. His ultra-sensitive epidermal receptors, designed to detect the most minute atmospheric changes and the faintest bioluminescent shifts, were instantly assaulted. Her skin wasn't merely warm as his sensors had predicted, it felt like a furnace compared to his species' cool, ambient temperature. And the texture, not smooth and slightly damp like Vthar skin, but dry, rough, and strangely alive with an invisible, buzzing presence. It wasn't pain, not precisely, but a profound, overwhelming wrongness. It was the sensory equivalent of 1,000 dissonant chords screaming in his auditory organs simultaneously. His delicate nervous system, accustomed to subtle inputs, was barraged by the sheer, unbridled hum of her existence. He felt, for a terrifying microsecond, as though his internal bioluminescent regulators were short-circuiting, his very essence threatening to unravel. The pat he intended became an involuntary recoil. His hand snapped back as if scalded, his 4 eyes wide in disbelief and, for the first time, genuine alarm. He stumbled back, bumping into Vexmari, who barely managed to keep him upright. Captain Morrison, her shoulder now free, slowly turned her head, her expression unreadable. She hadn't even flinched. She merely looked at Krellnan with an eyebrow slightly raised, a silent question in her gaze. The security humans, however, had reacted. Their hands were already moving, their stances shifting, their eyes narrowed. The tall male with graying hair had subtly placed a hand on a holstered device. Krellnan's advanced Thar physiology, designed for instantaneous threat assessment, was now screaming a single, terrifying truth: danger. Not from any overt act, but from the simple, horrifying reality of her physical being. He had underestimated them. Not just their strength, or their territoriality, but their very biology. Their crude, Deathworlder forms were a fortress, a generator of unseen forces that shattered his species' delicate sensibilities. The brief, casual touch had been a cataclysm. "Ambassador?" Captain Morrison's voice, still crisp, now held a faint edge of steel. "Is everything all right?" Krellnan could only manage a choked gurgle, his bioluminescence flickering erratically from confident blue to a pale, sickly green. His superior intellect, his diplomatic finesse, his carefully cultivated aura of dominance, all of it had evaporated in the horrifying instant of skin-to-skin contact. The primitive had just delivered a shock that no Thar had ever anticipated. And the negotiations hadn't even begun. "Ambassador?" Captain Morrison's voice cut through the buzzing chaos in Krellnan's senses. He tried to respond, to reassert his Thar composure, but his vocalizers felt paralyzed. His bioluminescence, usually a vibrant spectrum of confident hues, was flickering like a dying glowworm, stuck on an alarming, sickly green. Vexmari, his aide, was now frantically scanning him with her diagnostic pad, her multiple eyes wide with panic. "Sir, your dermal readings are off the charts. Biostress levels critical. Are you experiencing an allergic reaction? A pathogen?" Krellnan could only weakly wave a hand, the movement sending another jolt of disorientation through him. It wasn't a pathogen. It wasn't an allergy. It was them. The sheer, unadulterated humanity of Captain Morrison's skin had been an assault. His advanced nervous system, designed to process minute changes in atmospheric pressure and subtle energy fluctuations, had been utterly overwhelmed by the raw, untamed vibrancy of human biological activity. The warmth, the microscopic life, the subtle electrical impulses, it was like trying to filter a supernova through a pinhole. Captain Morrison stepped closer, her expression shifting from mild concern to something more guarded. The human security team took a collective half-step forward, their movements quiet but incredibly deliberate. Krellnan registered their stance, a primal, instinctive posture of readiness that even his limited knowledge of Deathworlder body language recognized as potentially threatening. He instinctively recoiled further, a pathetic whimper escaping his throat. "Is the ambassador unwell?" the tall human male with graying hair asked, his voice deep and calm, yet carrying an underlying resonance that vibrated uncomfortably in Krellnan's tympanic membranes. "Perhaps we should call for a medical team." Vexmari, ever the protocol stickler, straightened her posture, even as her own bioluminescence paled slightly in distress. "There is no need." Ambassador Krellnan simply experienced a momentary sensory overload. "Our species is highly attuned to environmental stimuli." The sudden change was unexpected. She shot a venomous glare at Krellnan, a clear message conveyed: "You were warned, you arrogant fool." Krellnan's internal processors were finally starting to clear, allowing him to process the situation with some semblance of his usual cunning. This was a disaster. Not just for his own pride, but for the entire Thar diplomatic mission. He, Ambassador Krellnan, master diplomat, had just had a public meltdown over a handshake. These crude, soft, barely civilized humans now held an advantage. They had seen him vulnerable, weak, ridiculous. He forced his bioluminescence back to a pale, strained blue, a pitiful imitation of his usual confident glow. "Indeed," he rasped, his voice still shaky. "A minor, atmospheric disturbance. Nothing to be concerned about. My apologies, Captain Morrison. My receptors are simply very sensitive to local conditions." Captain Morrison's eyes narrowed infinitesimally. "Of course, Ambassador. Perhaps we should proceed directly to the conference room then? You can rest there." Her tone was polite, but Krellnan detected a subtle shift, a barely perceptible hardening. He knew, with chilling certainty, that he had lost ground. All the meticulously planned psychological preconditioning, all the subtle displays of Thar's superiority, had been undone by a single, casual human touch. As they resumed their walk, Krellnan kept a wide berth from Captain Morrison, subtly nudging Vexmari between himself and any passing human. His mind raced, attempting to recalibrate his understanding of these Deathworlders. The xenobiology reports had mentioned their robustness, their high pain tolerance, and their unusual immune systems. But they had framed these traits as primitive adaptations, signs of a species that had to fight for survival on a harsh world. They hadn't conveyed the sensory nightmare that simply being in their close proximity could be for a more evolved, delicate species. He glanced at the younger human security officer who had been watching his delegation with such intensity earlier. She was still observing him, her posture relaxed, almost deceptively so. But her eyes missed nothing. He felt a shiver, an illogical fear. What other hidden dangers did these creatures possess? What other, primitive, adaptations were actually terrifying strengths? Inside the conference room, Krellnan avoided the plush, human-sized seating, opting instead for a smaller, temporary platform his staff had set up for him. He sat stiffly, his multifaceted eyes darting between Captain Morrison and the other human delegates. The older male, introduced as General Vance, regarded him with a calm, almost unnerving stillness. The compact female, Dr. Eris, scribbled notes on a data pad, occasionally glancing up with an expression Krellnan interpreted as shrewd curiosity. The younger male, Ensign Davies, continued to meticulously log everything, his gaze unnervingly neutral. The negotiations began, but Krellnan found his focus fractured. He kept reliving the sensation of Morrison's skin, the overwhelming, alien presence of it. He found himself unconsciously tensing when any human gestured too close, or when one of them cleared their throat, the sudden vocalization jarring his delicate auditory membranes. Captain Morrison, sensing his discomfort, maintained a professional distance, but her words seemed to carry more weight now. "Ambassador," she stated, her voice devoid of any pretense, regarding the proposed mining rights in the Cygnus sector. "Our preliminary surveys indicate a significant deposit of unobtainium, vital for our expanding infrastructure. However, the region also contains several uncharted gravitational anomalies and unpredictable solar flares. Our risk assessment models suggest a higher cost in both resources and, potentially, lives, than your initial offer acknowledges." Krellnan tried to inject his usual theatrical indignation into his reply, but his voice cracked slightly. "Higher cost? Captain, our technology for resource extraction is millennia beyond your current capabilities. We can mitigate any anomalies. The offer is generous, considering your current stage of development." Dr. Eris looked up from her pad, a slight smirk playing on her lips. "Ambassador, mitigate is a rather broad term. Our models account for contingencies. Perhaps your species has never encountered a solar flare that can strip a starship's shielding in under 30 seconds, or gravitational eddies that can fold space in unpredictable ways. Our engineers, having had to contend with a truly hostile home system, build with multiple redundancies. We've learned the hard way that unpredictable often means lethal unless properly planned for." Krellnan's confidence, already dented, took another hit. She wasn't wrong. The Thar had indeed evolved in a far more stable, predictable solar system. Their technology was elegant, efficient, designed for precision, not brute force survival against truly chaotic natural phenomena. The Deathworlders, it seemed, had a different kind of wisdom, forged in the fires of constant peril. The initial shock of Morrison's touch was slowly giving way to a more profound, unsettling realization: these humans were not just physically robust. Their entire civilization was built on a foundation of surviving the impossible. And Krellnan, for all his species' millennia of scientific advancement, suddenly felt very, very unprepared for what that truly meant. The negotiations, he realized with a sinking feeling, were going to be far more challenging than he had ever anticipated. The first session of negotiations ended with Krellnan feeling utterly drained, his multiple hearts pounding in erratic rhythm. He had managed to maintain a facade of Thar dignity, but it was a fragile thing, easily shattered. As the human delegates excused themselves, Captain Morrison offered a curt nod. "Ambassador. We will reconvene in 3 standard cycles. I trust you'll find the provided quarters comfortable." "Comfortable," Krellnan muttered to Vexmari as the conference room door hissed shut. "These humans consider a metal box with artificial gravity and recirculated air comfortable. Their very existence is an affront to refined sensibilities." He pushed himself off the platform, his limbs feeling unusually heavy. The effects of the sensory overload were lingering, leaving him feeling disoriented and irritable. Vexmari, however, was no longer focused on his comfort. Her multiple eyes were fixed on her data pad, scrolling through information at an alarming rate. "Sir, I've just cross-referenced the xenobiology reports with live sensor data from the station. The information regarding human resilience and their unique biological markers is far more extensive than our preliminary briefings indicated. Their epidermal layer alone possesses a multi-layered defensive system, complete with a complex microbial ecosystem that is completely alien to Thar biology." "Microbial ecosystem?" Krellnan shuddered. "You mean their skin is teeming with microscopic life forms? Unseen pathogens?" "Not pathogens, sir, not in the traditional sense," Vexmari clarified, though her voice held a note of unease. "More like symbiotic residents. They exist in a delicate balance with the human host, providing defense against external threats. To Thar, however, our immune systems have no recognition protocols for such diverse and aggressive biosignatures. It's why your sensory receptors reacted so violently. Your body perceived it as a massive, multi-pronged invasion." She paused, then added, "And that was just from a brief contact with skin, sir. The reports indicate their internal biology is even more robust." Krellnan felt a knot tighten in his gut. He had prided himself on his logical, scientific mind, but this new information was profoundly unsettling. "You mean to tell me that a simple touch from one of these primitives could incapacitate Thar?" "Potentially, sir, yes," Vexmari confirmed, her data pad chiming with another alert. "The reports also detail their incredible physical strength. Their muscle density is significantly higher than most known species for their size. And their bones, they possess a unique microstructure that makes them incredibly resistant to fracture. They have evolved on a world with high gravity and a constant threat of physical trauma. Their bodies are built like fortresses, sir, designed to absorb and distribute immense force." Krellnan mentally replayed his attempt at a condescending pat. He had barely touched Captain Morrison, and yet his system had gone into shock. What if he had pushed? What if she had reacted? The thought sent a jolt of genuine fear through him. He had dismissed them as fragile, believing their lack of natural claws or armored hides indicated weakness. He had been utterly, spectacularly wrong. Their bodies were their armor, their very existence a weapon against a galaxy of more delicate beings. And their personal space? Krellnan asked, the memory of Captain Morrison's stern warning returning. "A deeply ingrained cultural and biological imperative, sir," Vexmari explained. "It relates to their territorial instincts. To infringe upon it without invitation is seen as an act of aggression, a direct challenge. And given their physical capabilities, such a challenge could have severe repercussions." Severe repercussions. The words echoed ominously in Krellnan's mind. He remembered the subtle shift in the security team's posture, the way the tall male had reached for his sidearm. They hadn't reacted violently, not overtly, but the threat had been there, clear and unspoken. Thar could easily disarm a threat with a well-aimed bioluminescent pulse, or a precisely timed sonic burst. But against a human, a creature that could seemingly withstand a biological assault from a mere skin cell, and whose natural musculature was a crushing force, Krellnan suddenly felt very, very small. He spent the next standard cycle in his quarters, not resting, but poring over every available piece of human xenobiology data. What he read only deepened his alarm. Humans had an incredible capacity for endurance, able to function for extended periods with minimal rest. Their healing factor, while not on par with some of the galaxy's more exotic species, was remarkably efficient, capable of repairing severe tissue damage. They possessed a unique, rapid-response immune system that adapted quickly to new threats. And their senses, while not as refined as the Tharis, were incredibly broad-spectrum, allowing them to perceive threats and opportunities in ways that Krellnan was only beginning to grasp. He read about their fight-or-flight response, a primitive but incredibly effective surge of adrenaline and hormones that could temporarily elevate their strength and pain tolerance to astonishing levels. He read about their stubbornness, their refusal to yield even in the face of overwhelming odds. He read about their adaptability, their uncanny ability to not just survive, but to thrive in environments that would kill off most other life forms. By the time the 3 standard cycles were nearly up, Krellnan was a changed Thar. The arrogance had been chipped away, replaced by a chilling respect. His initial contempt for their primitive engineering and lack of artistic flourishes now seemed incredibly short-sighted. Their station, so functional in design, was a testament to a species that prioritized survival and efficiency above all else. Its loudness and brutishness were not signs of underdevelopment, but of robust, resilient construction, built to withstand impacts and stresses that would shatter Thar vessels. Krellnan looked at his reflection in the polished surface of his data pad. His bioluminescence was a steady, if slightly subdued, blue. The terror of the touch had faded, replaced by a profound understanding. He had not merely made a diplomatic faux pas, he had stumbled upon a fundamental truth about humanity. They weren't just Deathworlders, by designation, they were living embodiments of their world, forged in fire and chaos, and utterly, terrifyingly resilient. The negotiations for unobtainium, he now understood, were not about trade. They were about survival. And for the first time in his long, illustrious career, Ambassador Krellnan felt genuinely outmatched. The unspoken threat of humanity's sheer, unassuming toughness was far more potent than any aggressive display. When Ambassador Krellnan entered the conference room for the second session of negotiations, there was a noticeable shift in his demeanor. His ceremonial robes, usually worn with an air of dismissive grandeur, seemed to hang a little less arrogantly. His 4 eyes, once quick to dismiss, now moved with a newfound, almost wary, respect. He still opted for his specialized platform, but this time, it felt less like a display of Thar superiority and more like a necessary precaution. Captain Morrison, General Vance, Dr. Eris, and Ensign Davies were already present. Morrison's expression remained professional, but Krellnan could detect a subtle tightening around her eyes, a hint of amusement perhaps, or perhaps merely a heightened alertness. The security detail was present, their silent watch now carrying a different weight in Krellnan's perception. He noted the way their hands rested casually near their holsters, the subtle readiness in their posture. He no longer saw them as primitive guards, he saw them as finely tuned instruments of a Deathworlder's defense, capable of unforeseen responses. Ambassador Krellnan, Captain Morrison began, her voice crisp. We are prepared to discuss the next phase of the trade agreement regarding the Cygnus sector. Krellnan cleared his vocalizers, a different sound than his earlier disdainful huffs. It was a more measured, thoughtful tone. Captain Morrison, my apologies for my indisposition at our previous meeting. My species, as you know, has a highly sensitive sensory array. Your unique, biological signature proved to be a rather profound experience. He chose his words carefully, attempting to salvage some dignity without outright admitting his terror. Captain Morrison gave a slow, deliberate nod. Understood, Ambassador. Our xenobiology department has noted such sensitivities in other species during first contact. Rest assured, we have no ill intent. Her eyes, however, seemed to probe, trying to ascertain if his shift in attitude was genuine. Indeed, Krellnan continued, ignoring Vexmari's subtle flinch at his candidness. However, this profound experience has caused me to re-evaluate our initial assessments. My preliminary analysis of your species' capabilities, particularly regarding deep space resource extraction in volatile environments, was incomplete. He paused, forcing himself to meet Captain Morrison's gaze directly. Dr. Eris, your mention of solar flares capable of stripping starship shielding in 30 seconds. This is accurate? Dr. Eris, for the first time, allowed a genuine smile to touch her lips. More than accurate, Ambassador. Our home star, Sol, is notorious for its solar outbursts. Our early ventures into space were fraught with peril. We lost many vessels, and many lives, learning how to shield against such phenomena. We developed technologies that some might consider overkill, but for us, they were simply the cost of survival. Our ship hulls, our power conduits, even our atmospheric processors are designed to withstand catastrophic failure scenarios that most galactic species have never had to contend with. Krellnan listened intently, the pieces of the puzzle beginning to click into place. It wasn't just individual humans who were resilient, it was their entire civilization. Their technology, their infrastructure, their very philosophy was born from a brutal, uncompromising reality. Their primitive engineering wasn't primitive, it was robust, built for a galaxy that didn't care about delicate aesthetics, only survival. I see, Krellnan said, his voice quiet. And the gravitational anomalies in the Cygnus sector, your models are based on real-world experience? General Vance, who had been silent until now, spoke up, his voice gravelly but calm. Ambassador, our species has spent centuries navigating asteroid fields denser than any other known to the Federation. We've wrestled with rogue black holes that spun off from early star formation. We've built ships that can navigate through a cosmic tempest and come out the other side. When we say a region is unpredictable, it means our engineers are going to have to work overtime to build a ship that doesn't get torn apart. But we can build it. And we will. There was no arrogance in his tone, only a simple, undeniable statement of fact. This wasn't bravado, it was earned confidence. Krellnan leaned back on his platform, processing this new perspective. His species, the Vthar, had flourished in a galaxy that was largely benign, relying on their superior intellect and sophisticated, elegant technology. They had never truly been tested, not in the way these humans had been. Their death world wasn't just a designation, it was a forge. My initial offer, Krellnan finally stated, surprising Vexmari and even himself with the sincerity in his voice, was based on an incomplete understanding of the true cost of operating in such a sector. And of your unique capabilities in mitigating those risks. He hesitated, then continued. Therefore, the Vthar Concordance is prepared to revise our terms. We will increase the percentage of finished unobtainium delivered to your infrastructure projects by 20%, in addition to our previous offer of advanced terraforming technology. A ripple of surprise went through the human delegation. This was a significant concession, far more than they had anticipated. Captain Morrison's gaze intensified, a hint of triumph in her eyes. Dr. Eris stopped taking notes, her head snapping up. Even General Vance allowed a faint, almost imperceptible nod. Krellnan felt a strange sense of liberation. Releasing his rigid preconceptions, acknowledging his profound error, actually felt better than maintaining his facade of superiority. He had underestimated them, not just their grip, not just their surprising biology, but their entire existence. And in doing so, he had almost sabotaged a potentially invaluable relationship. Furthermore, Krellnan added, emboldened by the positive reaction, would request a comprehensive cultural exchange. My people, the Vthar, wish to understand more about your resilience, your adaptability, your methods for surviving such a hostile environment and thriving. We believe there is much we can learn from a species that has faced such profound challenges. Captain Morrison's smile, this time, was genuine. Ambassador Krellnan, she said, her voice warm, that would be most welcome. We have much to share, and much to learn as well. Perhaps, given time, you'll find our death world isn't so bad after all. Krellnan looked at her, at the quiet strength in her eyes, at the simple, unassuming power that radiated from her mere presence. He thought of the unsettling jolt of their first contact, and the profound, humbling lesson it had taught him. He realized that the greatest galactic mistake wasn't underestimating a Deathworlder's grip, but underestimating the Deathworlder themselves. He hadn't just touched a human, he had touched the raw, untamed spirit of survival, and it had shocked his entire world into a new, terrifying, and ultimately, respectful alignment. I believe these three parts give a very satisfying conclusion to the story, covering the regret and the shocking revelation of humanity's true nature. This brings the narrative to a powerful and insightful close, showing the evolution of the aliens' understanding. If you'd like a fourth part to explore the cultural exchange aspect further, I can certainly create that too.